The Young and the Restless spoilers. The news of Heather's body being pulled from the icy waters of the Wisconsin River hit Genoa City like a thunderclap. The police had been investigating a missing persons case, but nobody had expected it to end this way. Daniel, her ex-husband, had feared the worst, and now his darkest suspicions had come true. Heather was dead, and her body had been discovered in a burlap sack, floating lifeless in the freezing river. The discovery was gruesome. The authorities were called when a local fisherman noticed something odd drifting in the current. As they pulled the sack from the water, dread filled the scene. Inside was Heather's body, and though her face was barely recognizable from the cold and the water, the police quickly identified her through the ID cards found in her jacket. Heather's phone was missing, stolen, and her last known location remained a mystery. The police notified the family, and it wasn't long before the devastating news spread throughout Genoa City. For Daniel, the news was a punch to the gut. Heather, once his wife and the mother of their daughter, was gone, stolen from the world in the most brutal of ways. He had been worried about her ever since their relationship ended, but nothing had prepared him for this. The pain was almost unbearable, but something deeper stirred in him. Someone had done this. Someone had taken Heather's life, and that person was still out there. As preparations for the funeral began, the question lingered in the air. Who could have killed Heather, and why? She had never made enemies, had no outstanding debts, no grudges. She was living a simple, happy life with her family in Genoa City. As far as anyone knew, she had been at home, raising her child and maintaining a peaceful existence. There was no reason for someone to harm her, at least none that anyone could see. The funeral, held a few days later, was a somber affair. The chapel was filled with family, friends, and acquaintances, all in shock from the horrific turn of events. Sheila Carter, Heather's estranged mother, made her appearance, a figure of fear and loathing to many in Genoa. Sheila was notorious for her twisted schemes and criminal history, and her presence cast a long shadow over the service. People whispered, wondering if she had somehow been involved. But Sheila, for once, seemed genuinely grief-stricken. She had come to mourn her daughter, not cause trouble, at least not today. Danny Romolotti, Heather's father, stood beside Sheila, barely holding himself together as they paid their respects to their daughter. Christine Blair, a longtime family friend, also attended, offering her condolences and comfort to those mourning. The scene was surreal. So many people who had known and loved Heather gathered in one place, all asking the same question: how could this have happened? What kind of monster would take her life so brutally? As the funeral progressed, the atmosphere remained heavy with unspoken fear and uncertainty. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that the answer to Heather's murder was somewhere in the room. He stood at the back of the chapel, his eyes scanning the faces of those present. Who among them knew more than they were letting on? Who might be hiding something? He tried to focus on his grief, but his mind was racing. His instincts told him that Heather's murder wasn't random. Someone had targeted her, and whoever it was, they had left her body in the river as if trying to cover up their tracks. But the question remained, why? As the service ended, Daniel watched closely, looking for any sign of guilt, any flicker of suspicion among the mourners. But nobody seemed out of place. It was all too perfect, too quiet. He knew that someone here knew something. Someone was responsible for Heather's death, and they were hiding in plain sight. The funeral passed without incident, but for Daniel, the real investigation was only just beginning. He couldn't rest until he knew who had done this, until Heather's killer was brought to justice. He wouldn't stop, not until the truth was uncovered and the person responsible paid for what they had done. As the crowd began to disperse, Daniel's eyes settled on Sheila. For all her tears and grief, there was something about her that didn't sit right with him. He had seen Sheila manipulate people before. She was a master at playing the victim when it suited her. Could she have orchestrated this, somehow? It was a disturbing thought, but one Daniel couldn't dismiss so easily. Sheila had a long history of violence and deception. It wouldn't be out of character for her to have a hand in her own daughter's death, especially if it served some dark purpose of hers. But Sheila wasn't the only one under Daniel's scrutiny. He thought about everyone in Heather's life, both past and present. Could someone from her past have come back to haunt her? Had she crossed paths with the wrong person without even knowing it? There were too many unknowns, too many possibilities, and not enough answers. Daniel knew he had to dig deeper, to look into every detail of Heather's life in the months leading up to her death. As Daniel left the chapel, he couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The truth was out there, lurking just beneath the surface. It was only a matter of time before it came to light, but when it did, the consequences would be devastating. In the days that followed, the investigation into Heather's death intensified. The police were working tirelessly to piece together the final moments of her life, but leads were few and far between. There was no clear motive, no obvious suspect. The only clue they had was the stolen phone, and even that seemed to lead nowhere. Meanwhile, Daniel began his own investigation, retracing Heather's steps and talking to anyone who might have seen or spoken to her in the days before her death. The more he uncovered, the more he realized that Heather's life had been far from as simple as it appeared. There were secrets, hidden fears, and unspoken concerns that she had kept from him and everyone else. And as he dug deeper, Daniel began to suspect that Heather's death was part of something much larger, something far more sinister than he had ever imagined. Was it someone from her past? Was there a hidden danger she hadn't told anyone about? Or was it someone closer to home, someone they all trusted? The questions continued to mount, and with each passing day, Daniel's resolve to find the truth grew stronger. As the days turned into weeks, the tension in Genoa City only heightened. People whispered in hushed tones about Heather's death, speculating about who could be behind it. Fear gripped the town as the mystery deepened, and everyone wondered the same thing. Was Heather's killer still out there, watching, waiting, ready to strike again? One thing was certain. Daniel wouldn't rest until justice was served. Heather had been taken from him, and he wouldn't stop until he found the person responsible. But in a town full of secrets and lies, finding the truth would be more difficult than he ever imagined.